Welcome back, 365 Sports. Amanda Christovich of Front Office Sports here. And Amanda, we've had you on many times and all this settlement business and the new business of the NCAA, which may be going away if college leader. I mean, that's a whole nother thing that we kind of got dropped on us this week, is that, hey, they're trying to figure out a new way to do this, which is probably a good idea. But I believe I asked you when we had you on about the House settlement that the whole trying to limit what collectives can give people money for was going to be a hang up, because that seems to be against everything that the NCAA has been losing at, is that you can't tell people why they can get money as long as that money is obtained through legal means in the U.S. Constitution. So if they want to give me money for whatever they want to give me money for, it's their money. You know, it's not laundered or anything. So what are you preventing? And that's the issue that's hung this thing up, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I would definitely say there were several, issues, big and small, that were brought up by Judge Wilkin in the hearing last night. But the NIL collective one was by and far, the biggest one. And not even necessarily because it was the biggest issue for Judge Wilkin, right? And just for anyone who needs to be caught up, the settlement, the issue that she had was that the settlement says that the NCAA will be able to hire a third party to either approve or reject NIL deals over $600, which, is a de facto way of trying to say, hey, we are going to be able to reject deals that look like pay for play to us. But as you said, I mean, there's that age old saying that the value of something is what someone's willing to pay for it. So who's going to be able to determine whether or not it's pay for play or a fair market value? That's one of the issues she had with it. She had an issue with the definition of booster. And then she also just had an issue writ large with giving the NCAA the ability, as you said, to reject players from being able to earn money, especially reject deals that they may have currently, right? And because she had this line that she kept saying of like, in my experience, like things don't really go over well when you take things away from people, and especially like when adjudicating an antitrust case, like that's not going to fly, right? That last part was just me adding it.
Yeah.
But I mean, but it 100% was the biggest issue, because then the NCAA said, well, the lawyer was like, well, actually, like, if we don't have this provision, he said it's essential to us that we be able to police these deals. And if we don't have this provision in the settlement, we may not have a deal. Like, I got to go back to my clients and ask them if we still have a deal. So it's possible that the NCAA will just rip up the settlement if they can't get this provision in there, which, by the way, they clearly can't.
Yeah. So again, not an attorney,
Me
but
neither.
I would think that given how much money they've already had to pay in the settlement, or would have to pay in the settlement, that going to trial would be costlier. I mean, again, 0 days of law school. I'm just guessing. And so it looks like reading Ross Dellinger's column today, reading your stuff, that there are school presidents that are like, well, then let's go ahead and take it off the table and let's go to trial.
I mean, look, the whole reason that the NCAA and the power conferences agreed to engage in a settlement conversation in the first place, which, by the way, they almost never do when it comes to antitrust cases. They never want to admit any sort of wrongdoing. Obviously, settlements, there's usually sort of a stipulation about not admitting wrongdoing, et cetera, et cetera. But like, they never want to settle because they never want to set a precedent where they have to pay players. But this settlement, the damages, and in an antitrust case, something called treble damages, which is like tripling the amount of damages that are originally like in the settlement. I'm sort of butchering that description.
Yeah.
But it would bankrupt the NCAA. That's the whole reason why they wanted to settle in the first place, or even, considered it. So for them all of a sudden to say, we might be willing to go to trial over this one issue that clearly they're obsessed with the power of NIL collectives, but like, it's hard to, like, they may not exist. Like, they literally could go bankrupt, right? So personally, I don't understand those comments coming, going to other reporters about, yeah, let's just go to trial. Well, if you lose, then the NCAA literally will cease to exist. And it's not because a law will make that so, it's because they will lose all their money. And by the way, so will the power conferences, and so will everybody else. So this is just a long-winded way of me saying it does not make any sense to me why they would go to trial based on their own words and their own public statements about the doomsday scenario that is losing the House case in court.
Yeah, and maybe that's just posturing in some way, but I would think at this point, I mean, Jeffrey Kessler and the other attorneys kind of have them over a barrel here in that, okay, well, let's take out this provision about, monitoring the collectives. And I mean, I certainly think they could certainly put something in there where they can vet these things and make sure that people are legit, as opposed to just it being the Wild West. I don't think that would be disagreed to. But when you start putting a cap on earnings, that is where, that was what this is all about anyway.
Right.
It seems like the NCAA keeps missing that fact that, no, you guys got 100% of the money and they got 0% of the money. And now you're still trying to make sure that you get as much of that percentage as you can without realizing the reason you've lost this is that you took all that money for all this time.
Right. And everyone should be aware that the judge who is making these decisions, this is not her first rodeo. She has adjudicated at the district court level two of the biggest, most seismic NCAA related antitrust cases in history, O'Bannon and Alston. Alston's the one that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. At the time, she conceded and softened some of the decisions that she made in those cases in order to, quote unquote, not be the judge who kills college sports. But in the post-Alston world, where a Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the NCAA is in fact subject to, the economic laws of this country, despite what they've been saying for 40 years, I don't think she's afraid of that anymore. So she, more than anybody, is aware that when the NCAA, comes to you and says, we have this rule and it's supposed to be for amateurism and preserving, the athlete experience, but the rule is giving us the ability to keep the players from making more money, that's not going to fly with her. And, this isn't my idea. And I haven't gotten a chance to speak with one of the main attorneys, Jeff Kessler, since this hearing last night. He didn't seem particularly, interested in defending that part of the settlement either. He doesn't seem to care whether or not the athletes' NIL collective deals are restricted. Why would he? It's possible that he knew that the judge was going to have an issue with this and sort of said, you know what, NCAA, put it in, see if it flies. Okay, it's not going to fly. So now the NCAA either has to, agree to a settlement that does not include it or go to trial.
Yeah. And they seem to make the wrong decision each time on this. If they were playing Let's Make a Deal, they would always be like, well, I don't want the $50,000. I definitely need to know what's behind this door. And you're like, no, take the money and run. Yeah. It could be an old candy bar behind the door. You don't know. This. The bird in the hand kind of a thing, I think they don't quite get. And, we've heard reports that college leaders are working on a new model that would essentially replace the NCAA. But even if they came up with that has nothing to do with this. The NCAA wouldn't all of a sudden just be off the hook for all this money. That's where, I think some people getting confused. If we get this new thing really quick, then they'll forget about the other thing. No, we're talking about billions of dollars here that they have to pay out to thousands of people.
And can I just make two quick points about this idea of replacing the NCAA? Because every year there's breaking news that college leaders are talking about creating an entity that would replace the NCAA or breaking away. There are two major issues with that. Issue number one, as you said, is the liability question. The NCAA has been very, very successful in convincing even the most powerful of college sports leaders that it is in their interest to have an NCAA, because the NCAA is the one who, you know, takes up all the liability, and not just for these antitrust cases. They're the ones getting sued for the concussion cases too. They're the ones carrying that financial burden. So you take that away, and then the schools got to pay for it. And the schools are like, oh, wait. The conferences are like, oh, wait, actually, no, you could pay for that. Right. And then the other thing is the media contracts that were just signed by all the big power conferences that, you know, take us into the early 2030s, basically. In order to unravel those contracts, like every major network would have to agree to pull out of their current deals, right? If you're rejiggering, creating super conferences, like, I'm not saying it can't be done, but within the next 6 or 7 years, like, maybe it would make sense to say, okay, by 2035, we're going to create, you know, a breakaway league or something like that. The contracts are very complex, and every party, including, you know, Disney, NBC, TNT, CBS, Fox, would all have to get in a room together and agree to rejigger those contracts. And I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, that seems to be yeah, maybe it's just one of those things they say to get people to go like, oh, okay, there's something. But
Yeah.
there also have so many people that have to agree to this. It's going to take some time. So if you had to guess,
oh gosh, okay.
if you had to guess, which is hard, would you say that ultimately they try to posture a little bit and say, like, this is the deal breaker, we're going to go to trial to see what's going to happen, but then eventually the power conferences, like you say, will go, hey, whoa, we don't want a trial. This is not what we wanted. This is why we agreed to this. So go ahead and push your chest out and see if we can get anything. But at the end of it, let's just take this thing out and roll and move on with our lives.
It's hard to say, because from a motivation perspective, right? Like, I haven't been able to confirm this, but like, the question floating out there is like, is it the NCAA that is obsessed with this collective restriction, or is it the conferences, right? Because there's, you know, the 5 Power 5 conferences, including the 2-member Pac-12, plus the NCAA. Those are the 6 defendant entities that are negotiating on the defendant side. Like, so from a motivation perspective, I'm not 100% sure, like, which of those entities is willing to go to trial or not. If I were to have a crystal ball, it's like, the thing they should do is settle. The only thing that makes sense for them is to settle, you know, sort of like, make sure that you're not going to go bankrupt, make sure that you can live to fight another day, give, you know, the players the money that even you say they deserve, start this revenue sharing process. And, you know, they still have to battle the NIL restriction question in the Tennessee, Virginia state attorneys general case, right? Like, we haven't even talked about that. And it wasn't brought up last night, which was strange, because the NCAA can't enforce any of its NIL restrictions because of that. Anyway, I'm not really answering your question, because I'm telling you what they should do.
No, but you don't know if they will do it.
But I don't think they will. But maybe this is answering your question. I don't think they will do it. I think, I don't know. Part of me is like sitting here going, oh my God, like, they might actually blow up this deal and go to trial, because that's how obsessed they are, or they seem at least, with curbing the power of NIL collectives and making NIL collectives the boogeyman of this whole ecosystem.
Yeah, that's the thing that big corporations and entities like to do, is find something else that's the problem and pretend like, no, we're not bad, they're bad. Or like, we understand we made some mistakes, but this could be way worse than us. And like, you know, like, just, do you want to make it or not? I think that comes down to it. Somebody needs to say to them, do we want to make it or not? If we don't want to make it, then let's go. And I like, who knows who that voice is. And hopefully Charlie Baker knows this more than his predecessor knew, because I think that if that was still the administration, this would be nearly tragic.
Yeah. I mean, look, Charlie Baker is a very logical person. He, in his public comments has made it very clear that he sort of walked into a dumpster fire and sees it as a dumpster fire. And he doesn't necessarily believe these ideological, these sort of old amateurism ideological models that, Mark Emmert believed. But he has to serve his constituents, and his constituents go beyond the Power Five. I mean, all the Division I conferences were really upset about the settlement because they didn't want to have to, they're going to lose money because of it, because some of the money the NCAA is going to have to pay for the damages comes out of their distributions. But I spoke to a few commissioners like a week or two ago. They've all sort of like become good soldiers and fallen in line because they've been convinced that the settlement is better than the alternative. So if they've been convinced of that, it would be very surprising and confusing to me that all of a sudden the actual defendants who negotiated the terms of this deal have decided that it's not in their best interest to settle, when that's what they've literally just told everybody else.
All right, I'll finish this with a quote. I just saw this on Twitter. This is from Charlie Baker's letter that he sent to membership last night. Last night's hearing did not go as we hoped. The court posed worthwhile questions that the NCAA began working through immediately last night with our partners in the conferences. Our next step will be responding to the court's questions. As we prepare to do that, we will discuss the issues with the appropriate NCAA governance groups, including student athletes and campus and conference administrators. So he admitted, like, oops-a-daisy. we had didn't work out how we thought.
Right.
So I know that's a lot of, maybe a little bit of word salad there on, we'll talk to everybody and do this, but hopefully he can say, just let's take out the provision, throw in a very Diet Coke version of it, and move on with our lives. That's what I hope he does, because otherwise, man, this is going to be ugly, isn't it, Amanda?
It's going to be ugly, but man, a trial would be fun.
You sound like me the night that the Cowboys drafted Zach Martin and not Johnny Manziel, because covering the Cowboys, I'm like, look, they haven't won a Super Bowl in a long time. I'm here for the chaos, and I'm thrilled that they drafted Zach Martin. He's a future Hall of Famer, but part of me in the moment was like, oh, I want to see this. I feel like you're a little bit that way.
It would look, as a reporter, covering trials are, it's very like long hours, strenuous travel, et cetera, but it's fun and it makes your job easy because you just cover the news of the day and you're getting stuff that nobody would ever get, because journalists don't have subpoena power, but the lawyers do, right?
Yeah.
So we're learning information that nobody wants coming out. So I think it would be great fun for us. I can't say that it would be great fun for the NCAA, the conferences, or even the athletes, right?
Yeah.
Like they also want an answer. Like they want to start getting paid. So I think that's maybe my final comment is, but that's so funny. It's like, yes, thank you, Charlie. Like the lawyers realized that they screwed up. And then they poured a bunch of coffee and got into a room and were like, we're not leaving this room for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Amanda Christovich with us here from Front Office Sports. Amanda, thank you so much for hopping on. I know it was I asked you this morning, you hopped on, really appreciate it. Go read her stuff at Front Office Sports. It's really good. You are great explaining this to the,
thank you.
to the common folk. So we appreciate it.
I'm one of the common folk, I have my lawyer sources who translate it all for me. Trust me.
So thank you for being our go-between. Between the two. We appreciate it. Amanda, we'll have you on again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
This is 365 Sports.